The cemetery was quiet at first. White tents flap in the wind. Mourners on black kaftan and black ankara filled the tent. A golden casket rests above a dark, open grave lined with fresh cement. On the casket lies Judith Anderson, billionaire CEO, queen of 3 towers on Victoria Island, her eyes closed, cotton wool tucked in her nostrils, and her skin pale. Her husband, Williams, stands beside the casket with a folded handkerchief. Tears shine in his eyes. A pastor clears his throat. 2 grave workers step forward to lower the casket. Then a voice tears the air like thunder. "Stop, don't bury her." Everyone turned and shocked at the statement. Some of the mourners lifted their phones to record the unfolding drama. At the back, a man in a tattered brown coat pushes through the crowd. His beard is overgrown and tangled. His hair is wild. A dirty old bag hangs on his shoulder, heavy with the life he still carries. People pull away from him as if he is a storm. The man points straight at Judith. His hand shakes, but his voice does not. "She's not dead." I said, "Don't bury her." "Who is this?" Someone whispers. "Homeless man," another mutters. "Security." 2 guards move to block him, but he steps sideways and keeps coming. The wind lifts his coat like wings. He stops at the edge of the mat, where the casket rests, and faces the crowd. "My name is Benjamin," he says, breathless. "Listen to me. This woman is alive." Williams stiffens. His mouth hardens. "Get this madman out," he snaps. "Sir, you will respect the dead. Judith is my wife. She is gone. We will bury her in peace." The mourners murmured. The pastor lowers his Bible. The grave workers pause. Benjamin points again. Firm, steady. "She is not gone," he says. "She was given a substance. It slows the breathing. It makes the body cold. It fools the eye. She looks dead, but she is not. Give her the neutralizer." Now, a wave of shock washes over the mourners. Someone whispers, "Neutralizer." Another says, "What is he talking about?" Cameras tilt closer. A reporter leans in. Williams's face tightens with anger. "Enough," he says, turning to the guards. "Remove him." But Benjamin does not move. He lifts his chin. "Williams," he says softly, like he knows him. "You know what you did, and Dr. David knows too." The name drops like a stone in water. Eyes flick to the left. The family doctor, David, stands with his stethoscope tucked in his pocket, his lips pressed thin. He looks at Benjamin the way a person looks at a locked door. "Pastor," Williams says, voice sharp. "Continue the service." The pastor hesitates. His fingers tremble on the page. Benjamin takes one slow step closer to the casket. His eyes soften when he looks at Judith. "Madam," he whispers, almost to himself. "Hold on." Then he raises his voice. "Check her mouth. Touch her wrist. Warm her chest. She is there. I heard the plan with my own ears." Williams spoke of quick burial. Dr. David signed the paper. "Please give her the neutralizer." The hush deepens. Even the tents stop flapping, as if listening. A woman in purple lace steps out from the first row. Her hands shake. "If there is a chance," she says, "we should check." "That is not necessary," Williams snaps. Sweat shines on his forehead. "We did everything," the doctor confirmed. "Let them check," someone says from the crowd. "What will it cost?" Another voice joins. "Just check." Now the murmur grows into a wave. Heads nod. Eyes narrow at Williams. The guards look unsure. Dr. David clears his throat. "This is ridiculous," he says, forcing a smile. "Grief is making strangers speak nonsense." I examined. Benjamin turns to him, gentle but firm. "Doctor, she gave you a hospital. She bought you a car. She trusted you." Something flickers in Dr. David's eyes. He looks at Williams. Williams gives the smallest shake of his head, and that is when Benjamin drops his bag on the grass, kneels by the casket, and does a simple thing. He takes off his coat and folds it into a pillow. "Please," he says to the pastor, to anyone brave enough, "help me sit her up a little, just a little. She needs air." Then open her mouth only a drop. Silence. The kind of silence that hurts. An older woman steps forward. Her gel is tight and neat. Her eyes are wet. "I am her aunt," she says. "If there is one small thing we can do, we will do it." The spell breaks. 2 women move. A young man in a black suit places his hand under Judith's shoulders. The grave workers step back to give space. Together, carefully, they lift Judith just enough for Benjamin to slide the folded coat beneath her neck. Up close, Judith's face looks like sleep. Her lashes are long shadows. The cotton wool in her nostrils is white against her skin. "Please remove the wool," Benjamin says softly. Slowly, the aunt nods and, with gentle fingers, pulls the cotton free. The air seems to move again. Benjamin takes a small brown vial from his bag. It looks old, like it has seen many roads. He holds it up for everyone to see. "Neutralizer," he says. Her body was slowed by something bitter. "This will walk her back." Williams lunges, but two mourners step between him and Benjamin. "Let him try," one says. "If it fails, we bury. If it works, then what?" Williams spits. "Then what? Then we thank God," the aunt says, eyes sharp as a blade. Dr. David's jaw clenches. "Do not put strange liquid." "Doctor," the aunt says, "if you are sure she is gone, this will do nothing. Let him try." All eyes settle on the vial. The sun slips out from behind a cloud and rests like a hand on the scene, on the casket, on the open grave, on the man in the tattered coat who looks like hope. Benjamin kneels. His hands are steady now, made strong by purpose. He twists the cap and dips the glass dropper into the vial. He turns to the aunt. "Please help me open her mouth." The aunt slides a finger gently at the corner of Judith's lips. The young man in black lifts Judith a little more. Benjamin leans close. The crowd leans with him. Williams trembles. "If you do this," he begins. But his voice cracks. Benjamin holds the dropper above Judith's mouth. "One drop," he whispers. "Come back, madam." He squeezes. A single clear drop falls. It lands on Judith's tongue. Everywhere was quiet, waiting for happens next. Benjamin counts under his breath. 1, 2, 3, nothing. 4, 5. A wind shivers through the tents. 6. Benjamin's hand shakes. He raises the dropper for one more drop. "Don't you dare!" Williams shouts, stepping forward. The aunt lifts her palm. "Stay back." Benjamin squeezes. The second drop falls, and in that tiny space between drop and tongue, before it touches, a sound crawls up from Judith's chest, so faint it could be wind or memory. Was that a cough? The drop touches. Judith's throat moves, her lips part, and then the air around the cemetery broke into chaos. Screams, shouts, prayers, and gasps filled the place all at once. Phones tilted wildly, recording what no one could believe. Judith's hand had twitched, and now her lips parted with a faint cough. The sound was so soft, yet it cut through the noise like lightning. Benjamin's eyes burned with hope. He leaned closer. "She's coming back," he said, voice trembling but sure. "I told you she's alive." The aunt clutched Judith's wrist, and her face lit up. "She's warm. Lord have mercy, she's warm," she cried. Another woman screamed and fell to her knees in prayer, chanting, "God is great, God is great." But Williams was not moved. His face twisted into fury. As Judith's body stirred, his hand darted inside his jacket pocket. He pulled out something small, metallic, its glint caught in the sunlight. Benjamin froze. Was it a knife? A syringe? Or worse? "Stay back!" Williams roared, his eyes wild, spittle on his lips. "She belongs in the ground. Do you hear me? In the ground." Two men in black suits lunged toward him, but he shoved them away with desperate strength. The crowd surged backward, panicked. Mothers pulled children close. The pastor dropped his Bible, his voice cracking in fear. Benjamin did not move. He stood his ground, his ragged coat brushing the grass, his beard shaking with the wind. His voice thundered again, stronger than before. "Look at her, Williams. Look at your wife. She breathes." Everyone turned. And there it was, Judith's chest, rising and falling, weak but undeniable. Another cough burst from her throat, louder this time. Her eyes fluttered like heavy doors trying to open. The crowd gasped as one. The aunt shouted, "She's alive! She's alive!" Judith's lips trembled and a hoarse whisper escaped. "Why?" Her eyes half opened, glassy and confused. She stared at the man looming over her. Her voice grew louder, filled with pain. "Williams, why?" The scene shifted in an instant. The strength drained from Williams' body. His hand dropped, the metallic object slipping from his fingers. It clattered onto the concrete beside the grave, a small syringe filled with cloudy liquid. Gasps rippled again through the mourners. The guards pounced, pinning him to the ground as he kicked and screamed. "No," Williams roared. "She was supposed to be gone. She was supposed to be—" His words were cut off as the guards twisted his arms behind him. Sweat drenched his face, and the mask of grief he had worn melted into naked rage. All eyes swung to Dr. David. The doctor had stepped backward, his face drained of color. He tugged nervously at his collar, sweat sliding down his temple. I pronounced what I saw," he stammered. "I thought she was gone." Benjamin's voice cut sharp through the air. "Liar. You helped him. You signed her death, knowing she still lived." "It was not to rehabilitate," Judith coughed again, this time stronger. She struggled upright with the aunt's help, her hair tumbling loose, her skin damp with sweat. Her eyes, red and fierce, locked on Williams. Tears spilled, but her voice shook with power. "What did I ever do to you?" she said, her words cracking the silence. "To deserve this?" Williams froze in the arms of the guards. Judith's voice rose, trembling with anger and sorrow. "I gave you power. I trusted you with a branch of my empire. I loved you despite my wealth. And this is how you repay me." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some wept. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Judith's gaze shifted to Dr. David, who stood rooted like a guilty tree. "And you," she spat, her voice trembling. "I built your hospital. I gave you a car. I lifted you when you had nothing. How could you betray me with him?" Dr. David stammered, his lips fumbling for words. I... But the truth was already clear, written in his sweat, in his silence. Judith's strength faltered, and she swayed. Benjamin was at her side in an instant, steadying her with gentle, calloused hands. His voice was soft now, stripped of thunder. "Easy, madam. You are safe." She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. They were filled with tears, but beneath them was a glimmer of gratitude, fierce and raw. For the first time, she saw past the ragged beard and tattered coat. She saw the man who had saved her life. "Who are you?" she whispered, her breath shaky. "Why did you do this?" Benjamin lowered his eyes, his voice rough like gravel. "Because I knew the truth," he said. "I heard him yesterday, in his car. He spoke of quick burial, of silence, of how the empire would be his. I couldn't let it happen. Not again." The mourners drew closer, hanging on every word. Judith clung to his arm, her body trembling, her breath shallow but steady. Her voice cracked as she spoke. You saved me. You gave me back my life." William screamed again, thrashing against the guards. "She should be mine. Everything should be mine." But his cries fell flat, drowned out by the prayers rising from the crowd, by the sobs of those who had loved Judith, by the furious glares turned his way. Sirens wailed in the distance. The police were coming. Benjamin, still kneeling at Judith's side, lifted his head toward the approaching sound. His eyes burned not with pride, but with something deeper. Sorrow. The memory of his own broken life weighed on him like chains. Judith noticed. She touched his hand weakly. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't leave my side." And as the police vehicles rolled into the cemetery gates, their red lights flashing against the marble tombstones, everyone turned to watch the end of one chapter and the trembling beginning of another. Because Judith Anderson, thought dead, now breathed again, and the man who had dragged her back from the grave, the homeless stranger they had all ignored, was about to change everything. The officers stepped forward. The guards shoved Williams into their arms. Dr. David's knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, sobbing. The police read the charges aloud: attempted murder, conspiracy, betrayal, but Benjamin said nothing. He only held Judith steady as she sat upon her own casket, the woman who refused to die. And in that moment, with flashing lights bouncing across his weathered face, the world saw Benjamin not as a beggar, not as a madman, but as the voice that had stopped death itself. Judith whispered again, this time louder, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you for saving me." And the crowd, still in shock, leaned forward, wondering what would happen next. The court was overflowing. Every seat was taken, every corner crammed with people pressing forward to witness the case that had gripped the nation. Outside, television vans lined the street, cameras flashing as anchors whispered into microphones. The news was everywhere. Billionaire Judith Anderson rose from the dead. Husband and family doctor arrested in shocking conspiracy. Judith herself entered slowly, supported by Benjamin on one side and her aunt on the other. Her steps were unsteady, but her head was lifted high. She wore a plain black gown, nothing of her usual glittering elegance, but her presence filled the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she sat down at the front, her eyes fixed on the accused. Williams sat in the dock, his face pale, his eyes cold. Gone was the mask of grief he had worn at the funeral. Now his lips curled in disdain as he glanced at Judith. Beside him sat Dr. David, his head bowed, his hands trembling. Sweat darkened his shirt under the courtroom's bright lights. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp glasses, banged her gavel. This court is now in session. The case of the State versus Williams Anderson and Dr. David Ofori. Charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and medical malpractice. Woman. The prosecutor rose, his voice firm and cutting. My lord, what we have before us is not a simple matter of greed. It is the cold-blooded plot of a husband who sought to bury his wife alive, aided by a doctor who betrayed his oath. Their aim was to seize control of her empire, billions in assets, companies that feed families across this nation. But for the courage of one man, this wickedness would have been sealed under the soil, the crowd murmured. Many glanced at Benjamin, who sat quietly at Judith's side, his coat washed now, his beard combed, though his face still bore the scars of hardship. He looked down, uncomfortable under the sudden attention. The prosecutor turned toward Williams. Do you deny plotting to poison your wife with a slow-acting compound designed to mimic death? Do you deny instructing this doctor to pronounce her dead prematurely and rush her burial? Williams leaned forward, his voice cold. I deny everything. This is nothing but lies spun by a mad vagrant and a woman too weak to understand her own body's failure. My wife was dying already. I merely accepted it. Gasps. Judith's jaw clenched. She rose suddenly, her voice shaking with rage. You liar, she cried. Look at me, Williams. You put poison in my food. You forced my doctor, my friend, to swear I was gone. You tried to bury me alive, like trash. The judge banged the gavel sharply. Order in the court. But the electricity in the air was uncontainable. The prosecutor lifted a small vial, sealed in evidence bagging. My lord, this was retrieved from the syringe found beside the grave. Analysis proves it is a paralytic toxin capable of slowing the heartbeat, making the victim appear dead. Only a trained doctor could confirm life, and yet this doctor signed a death certificate. All eyes turned to Dr. David. His face collapsed. He sobbed openly, his words tumbling. I was forced. He threatened me. Williams said if I didn't help, he would ruin me. He said I would lose my hospital, my family. I swear, I only signed because I was afraid. Judith's face darkened. Afraid? You let him put me in a coffin. You let them lower me into the earth. You betrayed your oath and me. Dr. David buried his face in his hands. Forgive me, Judith. Forgive me. The prosecutor turned to the judge. My lord, we have the poison. We have the syringe. We have the testimony of the victim herself. And we have the witness, the man who risked his life to speak the truth. Benjamin froze as the prosecutor's hand gestured toward him. The entire court turned to face him. Whispers rose. That's the homeless man, the beggar who stopped the funeral. The judge nodded. Mr. Benjamin Okoro, please step forward. Benjamin rose slowly, each step echoing in the silent hall. He stopped at the witness stand, his rough hands gripping the wooden rail. The oath was read. He swore, his voice low but steady. The prosecutor leaned close. Mr. Okoro, tell this court what you witnessed. Benjamin lifted his head, his eyes scanning the hall. He swallowed hard. Then his voice rang out, calm but heavy with truth. The day before the burial, I was under the bridge, where I sleep. I heard a car parked nearby. 2 men were inside Williams and Dr. David. They were arguing. I heard Williams say, the poison worked. She is cold already. Tomorrow, we bury her before anyone suspects. The doctor said he was scared, but Williams told him, do as I say, or you'll lose everything. The crowd erupted again. The judge shouted for silence. Benjamin's voice grew stronger. I knew then that if I didn't speak, they would bury her alive. I waited at the cemetery. When they brought her coffin, I begged them to stop. They called me mad. But I saw her fingers twitch. I could not let them lower her in. He paused, his eyes moist. I lost my wife and daughter years ago. I was powerless then. But not this time. Not again. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the quiet sobbing of a few women in the gallery. Judith's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "God bless you, Benjamin." The defense attorney rose, his tone mocking. "So we are to believe the word of a beggar? A man who sleeps under bridges? How do we know he did not imagine these words? How do we know he wasn't paid by my client's enemies to cause chaos?" Benjamin's jaw tightened. He stood taller. "I may be poor, I may sleep on the streets, but I do not lie. I have nothing to gain, only the truth to tell." The judge leaned forward, her face stern. "The witness has spoken with courage. Let the court weigh his words alongside the evidence." Williams slammed his fists on the table. "He's lying. They're all lying." But his voice cracked, desperate, hollow. The gavel struck again. "Order!" As the trial moved on, one truth was clear. The mask of Williams had fallen. The empire he dreamed of was slipping from his grasp. And Benjamin, the man he would never have noticed in his richest days, now stood as the key to his downfall. And as Judith sat, her hand clutching Benjamin's, a new thought sparked in the hearts of all watching. Perhaps this was not just her resurrection, but his, too. The trial of truth had begun, and nothing would remain the same. The trial stretched into days. Each morning the courtroom overflowed with reporters, business magnates, and ordinary people who had come just to see Judith Anderson alive and speaking. Every evening the headlines blazed across Nigeria, from grave to courtroom, Judith's shocking return. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Williams sat stiff, his once perfect suits wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Gone was the smooth-talking businessman the public once admired. He looked like a caged animal, pacing, snarling whenever a witness spoke against him. Dr. David, in contrast, grew weaker with every session. He avoided Judith's eyes, his shoulders bent, as though carrying the weight of his betrayal. Sometimes he muttered prayers under his breath, his fingers trembling whenever evidence was shown. On the fourth day, the prosecutor called forward a new witness, Judith's personal driver, Chaik. A large man with honest eyes, he stepped to the stand, his voice steady. "My lord," he began. "On the night Madam collapsed, I drove her to the hospital. She was struggling to breathe. But when we reached the gate, Dr. David told me to leave, that he would handle it privately. I begged to stay. He refused. 2 hours later, he told us she was dead." The court gasped. Judith covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Chike bowed his head. "I knew something was wrong. Madam was weak, but not gone. I should have fought harder." The prosecutor nodded. "So you confirm, Mr. Chike, that Dr. David insisted on isolation and gave no room for second opinion?" "Yes, sir." The defense squirmed. Their case was collapsing like a wall of sand under rain. Next came the toxicologist, presenting charts and slides. The substance found in the syringe is called tetrodotoxin. In low doses, it mimics death, slows heartbeat, freezes muscles, masks breath. Without advanced equipment, one could easily mistake the victim for a corpse. It was intentional. This was no accident. The room fell silent. The weight of the evidence pressed on everyone. Finally, the judge turned to Williams. "Mr. Anderson, you have heard the charges, the testimony, the scientific proof. Do you have anything to say before this court passes judgment?" Williams rose slowly, his face twisted, half fury, half despair. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Yes, I have something to say. I loved Judith once, but she loved her companies more than me. Everything was always about her empire, her billions, her power. What was I? A shadow in her house. A husband in name only. I was supposed to share in her glory, yet she treated me like a servant." Judith flinched as though struck. The audience murmured, stunned. Williams's voice grew louder, his fists shaking. "So yes, I wanted it all. I wanted what was mine. If she had to die for me to live as a man, so be it." Chaos erupted. Shouts, gasps, cries of outrage filled the court. The judge banged her gavel furiously. "Order! Order!" Judith's tears spilled freely now. She stood, trembling but strong, her voice rising above the noise. You fool. Love is not stolen. Respect is not forced. You had everything, my trust, my home, my life. But your greed drowned you. You tried to kill me, and now you have killed yourself. Williams's eyes burned with madness. I regret nothing, he roared, his voice echoing. Guards surged forward as he tried to leap across the dock. They held him down, shackles clinking as he screamed curses. Dr. David broke into sobs, collapsing onto the floor of the dock. Forgive me, my lord. Forgive me, Judith. I betrayed everything I swore to be. I deserve death. The judge's gavel thundered once more. The hall fell into tense silence. Her voice was firm, unshaken. This court has heard enough. Williams Anderson, you are guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and greed of the highest order. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. May your chains remind you of the life you tried to bury. Williams screamed as the guards dragged him away, his voice echoing, It should have been mine, all mine. The judge turned to Dr. David. And you, Dr. David Ofori, trusted with life but dealing in death, your betrayal of your oath is unforgivable. This court sentences you to life imprisonment as well. You will never again hold the life of another in your hands. Dr. David collapsed into his chair, too broken to resist as police carried him out. The gavel struck a final time. Court dismissed. The hall erupted, some clapping, others weeping, all buzzing with the weight of history. Reporters rushed out to spread the verdict. Judith, exhausted, sank into her seat. Her body trembled with relief and pain. She whispered, It's over. But beside her, Benjamin shook his head gently. No, madam, it is only the beginning. You have your life again. Now, what will you do with it? She turned to him, her eyes soft, her lips trembling with gratitude. I wouldn't be here without you. You have no home, no rest. Yet you gave me both. Benjamin, you saved me. Benjamin looked away, his voice quiet. I only did what I could not do before. My wife, my daughter, I failed them. But this time, I could not fail. Judith touched his hand, firm and warm. You did not fail. You were my miracle. Around them, people gathered, trying to shake Benjamin's hand, clapping him on the back, praising him. He had been invisible for years, a shadow on the streets. Now he stood in the light, the man who stopped a burial, the man who saved a billionaire. Judith rose, still holding his hand. You will not return to the bridge tonight, she said firmly. From this day, you walk with me. If I lived again, then so will you. Benjamin's throat tightened. Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded, silent. For the first time in years, he felt seen, and as they left the courtroom together, Judith, her aunt, and Benjamin at her side, the crowd outside roared like a storm, cameras flashing, voices chanting his name. Benjamin, Benjamin, the man who stopped death, and though the chains had closed on Williams and David, new doors were opening, doors that neither Judith nor Benjamin had ever imagined before. The battle for justice was won, but the journey of redemption had only just begun. The heavy doors of Judith Anderson's mansion opened to a new season of life. The house that once smelled of morning now breathed fresh air, its corridors filled with sunlight and hope, but behind the glow, the scars of betrayal lingered. After the trial ended and Williams and Dr. David were sentenced, Judith invited Benjamin to stay at her estate. One evening, after dinner, she led him into her private study. The room was lined with mahogany shelves, books stacked in neat rows, and a single lamp casting a warm glow. Judith poured 2 glasses of water and gestured for Benjamin to sit. His hands shook slightly as he held the cup. For a long time, he stared into it, as though searching for courage. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and raw. Madam Judith, there's something I've carried alone for years. Tonight, I must say it. Judith leaned forward, her eyes soft with concern. He swallowed hard. I wasn't always like this. I was once a man with dignity, a software engineer, a husband, and a father. But one day, everything collapsed. I lost my job. My wife packed her things, and she vanished with my daughter. She left only a note. His voice broke. A note telling me the child I raised, the girl I called mine, wasn't my blood. Judith's eyes widened, tears springing to them. Benjamin pressed his palms together tightly. The betrayal destroyed me. I wandered the streets, unable to breathe, unable to live. I slept under bridges because hope abandoned me. His shoulders trembled. But yesterday, Under that bridge, I overheard Williams. He was making phone calls from his car, planning to take over your companies after you were buried. His words froze my blood. That's why I ran to the cemetery. That's why I stopped them. For a long moment, silence filled the study. Only the faint ticking of the clock could be heard. Judith's hands shook as she reached across the table and clasped his. "Benjamin," she whispered, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You carried all that pain, and still you risked your life for me. Do you know what that means?" Benjamin's voice cracked. "It means, maybe I still have a reason to exist." In the days following his confession, Judith refused to let Benjamin slip back into the shadows of her mansion. She saw something in him, not just a man who had saved her life, but a mind sharpened by hardship and loss. At first, Benjamin resisted. "Madam, I am no longer the man I used to be. Let me serve you quietly in the background," he said one morning as he helped carry files from her study. But Judith shook her head. "You will not hide anymore. You have given me back my life. Let me give you back yours." So Benjamin began helping with small duties in Anderson Holdings, carrying files, checking schedules, organizing reports. He moved with humility, keeping his head down. Yet little by little, his hidden brilliance surfaced. One afternoon, during a tense board meeting, the company's directors struggled with a corrupted presentation file. Panic spread across the room as investors waited impatiently. While others fumbled, Benjamin quietly stepped forward. In minutes, he reprogrammed the system and restored the slides. Gasps filled the room. "Where did you learn that?" a director asked in disbelief. Benjamin hesitated. "I was once a software engineer, before everything fell apart." Judith's eyes softened with pride. She rose and announced firmly, "From today, Benjamin is no longer a helper in the background. He is my special advisor, and his counsel will guide this company." The board members exchanged looks, some skeptical, others intrigued. But no one could deny the calm authority in Judith's voice. For the first time in years, Benjamin stood tall. No longer a nameless wanderer, he was a man reborn, and with his input, Anderson Holdings was never the same again. Judith and Benjamin grew closer. They spent evenings in the study, talking about life, faith, and second chances. She admired his honesty, his unpolished wisdom, his sincerity that cut deeper than diamonds. For the first time since her betrayal, she found her heart stirring. Quietly, Judith wished he might love her, not as the billionaire the world saw, but as a woman whose soul had been bruised. Yet Benjamin never seemed to notice the silent longing in her eyes. One afternoon, as they strolled in the garden, Benjamin spoke with unusual excitement. "Judith, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Juliana. She is kind, gentle. She makes me smile again." Judith's heart clenched. She forced a smile, even as her chest ached. She had hoped foolishly that Benjamin might see her as more than a friend. But reality stood firm. He loved another. That night, Judith cried alone in her room. Yet by dawn, she resolved her pain into strength. "If he cannot be mine, then I will support his happiness." When Benjamin proposed to Juliana months later, Judith insisted on sponsoring the wedding. "It is my honor," she told him, her smile hiding the bittersweet truth in her heart. The wedding day was beautiful. The garden was decorated with white roses and golden drapes. Benjamin stood tall in a navy blue suit, his eyes glowing as Juliana, dressed in an elegant white gown, walked toward him. Judith watched from the front row, her eyes glistening. Though her heart once longed for him, she felt peace seeing him happy. When they exchanged vows, she clapped with genuine joy, whispering to herself, "This is what he deserves: love, laughter, a new beginning." Months after Benjamin's marriage, fate surprised Judith too. At a charity gala, she met George, a businessman known not for wealth alone, but for his humility and compassion. He admired Judith not as a billionaire, but as a survivor. Their friendship grew into something deeper. George brought back laughter into Judith's life, and for the first time since her near death, she felt whole. When George proposed months later, Judith said yes. At her wedding, Benjamin and Juliana sat proudly in the front row, clapping as she walked down the aisle. This time, there were no tears of regret, only gratitude. 1 year later, life blossomed again. Benjamin and Juliana welcomed a baby boy whom they named Jonathan. Around the same time, Judith and George celebrated the birth of their baby girl, Eliana. One golden evening, they gathered in the mansion's garden, the babies cradled in their arms. Benjamin rocked Jonathan gently while Judith held Eliana close to her chest. Tears filled their eyes as they looked at each other. They remembered how close death had come, how betrayal nearly buried them both. Yet here they were alive, surrounded by laughter, holding the promise of a future in tiny, innocent hands. Benjamin raised his glass. "From ashes to dawn," he said softly. Judith smiled, whispering back, "Yes, from ashes to dawn." But one name was never forgotten. Williams. In prison, Williams was a broken man. The arrogance that once fueled him had crumbled under the weight of iron bars. Life behind walls gnawed at him, and every night he replayed the moment he watched Judith rise from the coffin. He began writing letters from prison, begging for forgiveness. At first, Judith ignored them, but the letters never stopped. They grew humbler, soaked with regret. "Judith, I was blind. Greed consumed me. If I could turn back time, I would kneel at your feet and beg 1,000 times. Please forgive me. Let my story be a warning to others." 10 years later, on the 10th anniversary of Judith's survival, she shocked the nation. At a grand event where her family, Benjamin, Juliana, and their children stood beside her, she announced, "10 years ago, I nearly went to the grave because of betrayal. But today, I choose not to let hatred bury me again. I forgive Williams Anderson." The hall gasped. Some clapped, others murmured in disbelief. But Judith's eyes were firm. "Forgiveness is not weakness, it is freedom. If my survival is to mean anything, it must teach us that love, not vengeance," writes the final chapter. Undersewed, weeks later, Williams was released after 10 long years. He walked out of prison, a frail man, his once proud face lined with regret. He had nothing left, no wealth, no family, no power. In a tiny rented room on the outskirts of town, he lived quietly. Whenever Judith appeared on television, smiling with George, laughing with Eliana, he would sit alone, tears running down his face. He whispered to the empty walls, "Greed destroyed me. Let my mistake teach others what I failed to see." Back at the mansion, Judith and Benjamin often sat in the garden together with their spouses, watching their children play. They spoke not of betrayal anymore, but of hope. Judith would smile at Benjamin and say, "We lived through death, and now we live for life." And as the sun set behind them, painting the sky with golden fire, their story stood as a testimony that even from the grave, hope can rise. That from betrayal, love can bloom. That from ashes, dawn will always come. What is your view about this story? If you were in Judith's shoes, would you have forgiven Williams? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. The sun had barely set over Lagos when Judith Anderson thought peace had finally returned to her life. Forgiveness had become her balm, her way of closing the painful chapter of betrayal and near death. By forgiving Williams, her former husband, who once tried to bury her alive, she believed she had silenced the ghosts of her past. Williams himself was now a free man, stripped of wealth and status, living in regret, crying in small rooms at the outskirts of town about how greed had ruined him. But Judith had forgotten one man, Dr. David Ofori. He was the family doctor who, under pressure and promise of riches, had injected Judith with the substance that mimicked death. While Williams was released and pitied, David languished behind bars, his name erased, his medical license revoked, his hospital sealed, and his family scattered. His wife sent him divorce papers. Worse still, his 2 daughters had died when she couldn't afford their surgeries. The news broke him completely. From his prison cell, bitterness hardened into something darker. "Judith and Benjamin destroyed my life," he muttered to himself, night after night, refusing to admit that his own choices had paved the way for his downfall. Dr. David began scheming. He made friends in prison, men like Scar, a brutal gang leader with scars across his face, and Simon, a sharp-eyed conman with a history of violence. Together, they dreamed of escape, of revenge, of one last strike against the world that had rejected them. It was on a humid Tuesday morning that the news broke. 3 prisoners had escaped from the maximum security prison in Ogun State. Among them was Dr. David Ofori. The headlines raced across the nation. Convicted doctor escapes with gang members. David Ofori, ex-family doctor of Anderson dynasty, on the run. Inside her mansion, Judith sat frozen in her living room, the newspaper trembling in her hands. George, her husband, paced the floor with a worried expression. "George," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He will come for me. He has nothing left to lose." George clasped her shoulders. "Calm down, Judith. We'll tighten security. The police will find him." But Judith wasn't convinced. Her heart pounded with dread. The one man she had forgotten to forgive was the one man who refused to forget her. Without wasting time, she reached for her phone and dialed Benjamin. Within the hour, Benjamin and his wife Juliana arrived at the mansion. Benjamin, still carrying the humility of his past, yet the strength of his reborn life, sat opposite Judith and George. "This is no ordinary threat," Benjamin said grimly. "David will not stop until he tries to destroy everything." Judith nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I should have forgiven him too. Perhaps this is my biggest mistake." Benjamin shook his head. "No, Judith. His choices were his own. But now, we must prepare." That same night, in a shabby hotel on the outskirts of town, David sat with Scar and Simon. A single dim bulb swung overhead, casting shadows across their faces. David's once pristine doctor's hands were rough and scarred now. His eyes burned with fury. "Listen," he hissed. "I have nothing left. No profession, no family, no name. But I know one thing. Judith Anderson and that beggar turned hero, Benjamin, are the reason I am here. They celebrated while I rotted. Tonight, we plan. Soon, we strike." Scar leaned forward, his scarred lips curling into a sinister smile. "We follow your lead, Doctor. Who are the targets?" David's jaw tightened. "Judith, Benjamin, and her new husband, George. I want them to bleed as I bled." Simon chuckled darkly. "Then let's bleed them." The three men shook hands over the battered table, sealing a pact of destruction. The night was quiet at Judith's mansion. The security guards patrolled lazily, unaware of the danger lurking. Then gunfire shattered the silence. Bullets rained through the gates as Scar and Simon charged in with David behind them. Chaos erupted. Security scrambled, but before they could react, the attackers had forced their way into the main building. George rushed forward, shielding Judith, while Benjamin ran from the sitting room with only his fists to defend her. 2 shots rang out. George fell back with a bullet lodged in his left chest. Benjamin staggered, clutching his right chest as blood soaked through his shirt. Both men collapsed onto the marble floor, gasping, their eyes wide with pain. Judith screamed, rushing toward them, but David grabbed her by the arm and shoved her to her knees, his face twisted with rage. "You humiliated me, Judith," he spat, his spit flying. "You took everything from me. Do you know what it means to lose your children? To watch them die while you rot in prison?" Judith trembled, staring up at him. "David, you destroyed yourself. Not me." But David's hand rose in fury. "I will make you bow before me. I will slap you, humiliate you, and then bury you this time. No one will stop me." At that very moment, headlights flooded the driveway, and a storm of sirens filled the air. Armed police officers stormed the mansion. "Drop your weapons," they shouted. David spun around, panic flickering in his eyes. Scar fired at the police, but was quickly shot in the leg. Simon tried to flee, but was gunned down in the thigh. Within seconds, the three were on the ground, screaming in rage and pain. David's voice thundered as officers cuffed him. "Judith, I will return. You haven't seen the last of me." Judith collapsed in tears as paramedics rushed in. George and Benjamin, barely conscious, were placed on stretchers and rushed into waiting ambulances. Juliana clung to Judith, both women weeping uncontrollably. "Save them," Judith begged the doctors in the emergency ward later that night, her voice breaking. "Save them at all costs. I'll pay whatever it takes." The surgeons worked tirelessly, fighting against time. Hours stretched into an eternity. Judith and Juliana waited outside, holding hands, praying, every second heavier than the last. Finally, as dawn broke, the doctor emerged, his gown stained with sweat. His words came slowly. "They survived. The surgeries were successful. But it will take time, patience, and strength for them to heal." Judith let out a sob of relief. She fell to her knees, thanking God, tears flowing freely. Inside the recovery room, she and Juliana entered quietly, their hearts breaking at the sight of George and Benjamin lying pale and bandaged. They took their husbands' hands gently, tears dripping onto the white sheets. Judith whispered shakily, "You gave your lives to save me. I will never forget this love. Outside, reporters were already gathering, the nation buzzing about the failed assassination attempt. But inside that cold hospital room, Judith and Juliana wept not for the headlines, but for the two men who had nearly died for love. The war with David wasn't just about survival anymore. It had become a battle for peace that seemed forever just out of reach. 2 days after the attack on Judith's mansion, Lagos was still buzzing with the news. Newspapers screamed bold headlines. Ex-doctor and prison escapees storm billionaire's mansion. Judith Anderson survives another deadly plot. The nation trembled at the thought of how close Judith, Benjamin, and George had come to death. Security across the city was heightened. Yet, for Judith, the most pressing matter wasn't the headlines, it was seeing her husband and her closest friend lying in hospital beds, their bodies covered in bandages. She spent her nights at the hospital, holding George's hand with one arm and stretching the other to clasp Benjamin's whenever Juliana, Benjamin's wife, was too tired to keep vigil. Each beep of the machines was a reminder of how fragile life was. But while her heart bled in the hospital, justice was preparing its stage. On a humid Friday morning, the High Court of Lagos was packed. Armed police officers lined the entrance as crowds surged, desperate to witness the trial of the infamous escapees. Inside the courtroom, tension buzzed. Journalists filled the back rows, their cameras flashing, pens scribbling feverishly. The defendants were ushered in, shackled, their orange prison uniforms stark against the polished wooden floor. Scar limped, his face set in stone. Simon scowled, muttering curses under his breath. And then came Dr. David Ofori, once respected, now a shadow of his former self. His once pristine white coats had been replaced by rags of shame. He avoided Judith's eyes, but anger radiated from him like heat. At the front sat the judge, Justice Emmanuel Dike, a middle-aged Nigerian man with a reputation for fairness and incorruptibility. His stern gaze swept the courtroom, silencing the murmurs. "All rise," the clerk announced. The trial began. The prosecutor, a sharp-tongued woman named Barrister Ada Okafor, wasted no time. "Your Lordship, the crimes before this court are grave. The defendants stand charged with unlawful prison escape, criminal conspiracy, attempted murder, and unlawful possession of firearms." On the night in question, they stormed the home of Mrs. Judith Anderson with the intent to kill. 2 men, Mr. Benjamin Okeke and Mr. George Anderson, were shot and left for dead. By divine providence, they survived. But let us be clear, the intent was murder. Gasps filled the courtroom. Ada continued, her voice rising with passion. These men believed they could take the law into their own hands, but Nigeria is not a jungle. We will show evidence, we will bring witnesses, and we will prove beyond reasonable doubt that they deserve the full weight of the law. First came the security guards from Judith's mansion. Their testimonies painted the scene vividly, the sound of bullets tearing through the night, the chaos of Scar and Simon forcing their way in, and the sight of Dr. David holding Judith hostage. Next came Judith herself. She walked into the witness box in a simple black gown, her head held high despite the tremor in her voice. "Dr. David was once my family doctor. I trusted him. But that night, I saw a man I no longer recognized. He pointed his fury at me, saying I ruined his life. Yet it was his greed, his choices, his betrayal of his oath as a doctor that brought him here." David smirked from the dock, shaking his head, but the weight of Judith's words hung heavy in the air. Benjamin's wife, Juliana, also testified, her voice breaking as she recalled holding Judith's hand in the hospital waiting room, praying that Benjamin and George would live. The final witness was the lead police officer who led the rescue. He confirmed the confrontation, the shootout, and the arrests. When it was time for the defense, David shocked the courtroom by choosing to speak for himself. He stood, his chains clinking. "Your Lordship, I admit to my actions. Yes, I entered Judith Anderson's mansion. Yes, I raised my hand against her. But ask yourself, who made me what I am today? I was a doctor, respected. My daughters looked up to me. But because of Judith and her beggar friend, I lost everything. My daughters died because I couldn't provide. My wife abandoned me. And what did Judith do? She forgave her husband, but left me to rot." His voice cracked into a roar. "I am not the villain here, I am the victim." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others whispered in pity. Justice Dyke banged his gavel. Order! Scar and Simon added nothing. Their silence spoke louder than words. They had followed David, and now they would pay with him. After hours of arguments, Justice DK rose, his black robe flowing as he prepared to deliver judgment. The courtroom stilled. Dr. David Afori, Scar Okeke, and Simon Ubar, you stand guilty on all charges: unlawful prison escape, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit multiple murders, and unlawful possession of firearms. This court recognizes that you, Dr. Ofori, once bore the noble title of physician. Yet you betrayed your oath to save lives. You allowed greed to corrupt you. Instead of remorse, you embraced bitterness and violence. Nigeria cannot allow such lawlessness to thrive. Therefore, this court sentences you to death by hanging. The words struck the courtroom like thunder. Gasps echoed, followed by silence so heavy it was suffocating. David's face twisted, his eyes wide with rage. "This is not the end," he screamed as officers dragged him away. "Judith, Benjamin, you will remember me. You will remember." Scar and Simon struggled as well, but the chains held firm. The gavel banged once more, sealing their fate. Among the spectators sat Williams Anderson, Judith's former husband. He bowed his head as the judgment was pronounced, shame burning his face. He knew the truth. It was he who had first drawn David into the dark plot against Judith years ago. After the session ended, Williams approached Judith outside the court. For the first time, the proud man humbled himself, dropping to his knees before her. "Judith," he said hoarsely, "forgive me again. If I had not begun this evil years ago, David would not have walked this path. His blood, his fall, it began with me. I destroyed everything with my greed. Please, forgive me once more." Judith's eyes filled with tears. She placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Williams, I forgave you once, and I will forgive you again. But you must forgive yourself and learn from this. That is the only way forward." Williams nodded, his tears falling freely. He asked to follow her to the hospital to greet Benjamin and George, but she shook her head gently. "Not today, Williams. Some doors must remain closed." Back at the hospital, Judith rushed to the ward where George and Benjamin were recovering. She stood between their beds, holding their hands tightly. Juliana wept quietly by Benjamin's side, while nurses adjusted George's drip. "They sentenced David, Scar, and Simon," Judith whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. "Justice has been served, but I want you both to know something. The way you risked everything for me. I now fully understand how much I am loved and valued." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she kissed their foreheads. "Thank you for saving me." Benjamin squeezed her hand weakly, a small smile flickering on his lips. George blinked back tears, whispering, "For you, Judith, always." The nightmare was over, at least for now. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and quiet hope. Days had turned into weeks since the bloody night at Judith's mansion, when bullets nearly stole the lives of George and Benjamin. Though the memory of that night still haunted everyone, the slow rhythm of healing had begun. Judith rarely left the hospital. She lived between two beds, George's and Benjamin's. By day, she read business reports by their side, her eyes flicking constantly to the monitors. By night, she prayed in hushed whispers, clutching George's hand in one room and Benjamin's in the other, as if holding on to both would keep death at bay. Juliana, Benjamin's wife, was a constant presence too. Her once bright smile had dimmed into weariness, but her strength was unmatched. "My husband will rise again," she repeated to anyone who asked. God did not bring him this far to abandon him. Recovery was far from easy. Benjamin battled fevers and infections, his chest bandaged tightly. Sometimes he groaned in pain so deep that Juliana would cradle his head, whispering prayers into his ears. George, too, endured sleepless nights, his breathing ragged as doctors worked to prevent further complications. One particularly hard night, Judith sat between their rooms, her head bowed, tears streaming silently. "Why must those I love always bleed for me?" she whispered into the quiet hallway. Benjamin, awake despite his weakness, heard her voice through the open door. He rasped, "Don't cry, Judith. We bleed, because love is worth it." Judith clutched the doorframe, overwhelmed by his words. Even at death's edge, Benjamin's heart was steady, the same heart that once beat in the shadows of homelessness and despair. Now shining in loyalty, the nation followed every update with rapt attention. Newspapers carried headlines about the men who risked everything for Judith. Crowds gathered outside the hospital daily, praying and holding candles. Strangers sent flowers, cards, and donations, filling the hospital lobby with reminders that the whole country was watching and hoping. Inside, however, it was the simple acts that mattered most. Judith spoon-fed George broth when he was too weak to lift his hand. Juliana wiped Benjamin's brow after every fever broke. Nurses hummed old Yoruba hymns as they changed bandages, their voices soothing the patients more than any medicine could. Slowly, strength began to return. Benjamin learned to sit up again, gasping but determined. George managed short walks with a nurse on either side. Each small victory felt like a triumph. While George and Benjamin fought for their lives, Judith carried another burden. She was summoned to court to testify during the sentencing review of Dr. David, Scar, and Simon. She walked into the courtroom in a white gown, her head high. Though the judge had already pronounced their death sentences, the law required one final confirmation. When asked if she had any words, Judith spoke softly but firmly. "I do not hate them. I will not waste my life on hatred. But justice must be done, for the sake of all who suffer when greed and anger consume men. Let their judgment serve as a lesson. Choices have consequences." Her words were broadcast across the nation, stirring debates about forgiveness, justice, and second chances. Yet, despite her calmness, inside Judith's heart was still a storm. 1 week after the judgment was implemented, Dr. David, Scar, and Simon were executed, to serve as deterrent for anyone that want to follow their evil ways. At last, after 6 long weeks, the doctors delivered the news everyone had prayed for. George and Benjamin were stable enough to be discharged. The day of their release became a celebration. The hospital's courtyard overflowed with reporters, staff, and strangers who had come to witness the miracle. Judith stood at the entrance, tears already flowing, as 2 wheelchairs rolled out side by side. George, thinner but smiling, raised a weak hand in greeting. Benjamin, pale but alive, leaned on Juliana, his eyes glistening as he took in the crowd. Judith couldn't contain herself. She rushed forward and embraced them both, her sobs echoing across the courtyard. "Thank you," she whispered brokenly. "Thank you for saving me, for proving to me again that love is stronger than hate." The crowd erupted in applause, some chanting prayers of thanksgiving. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as a symbol of resilience and hope. Back at the Anderson mansion, the atmosphere transformed from fear to joy. The once haunted corridors now rang with laughter. Staff lined the driveway to welcome their masters home, singing traditional songs of survival. George insisted on walking slowly into the house, leaning on Judith's arm. Benjamin, with Juliana by his side, smiled faintly as he inhaled the familiar scent of the mansion's gardens. Inside, a feast awaited. Family, friends, and close allies gathered around the long dining table. There were prayers, songs, and speeches. Judith raised a glass, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. "This house was once filled with fear," she said, "but today, it is filled with love. We have lost much, but we have also gained strength, faith, and family. Let this be the beginning of healing." Everyone raised their glasses in agreement. Later that evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. Williams, Judith's ex-husband, stepped quietly into the mansion. His shoulders stooped, his eyes red from crying. "I came to see them," he said softly. "To see the men who bled for the woman I once betrayed." Judith hesitated, then nodded. Williams walked to George and Benjamin, who were resting in the lounge. He knelt before them, his voice shaking. "I destroyed my own life with greed," he confessed. "And in doing so, I dragged David into the darkness. If not for me, none of this would have happened. I do not ask for friendship, only for your forgiveness." Benjamin looked at him, his face unreadable. Finally he said, "The past is gone. What matters is what you do with the life you still have. Be a better man, Williams." George nodded weakly. "Repentance is not in words, but in deeds. Live differently." Tears streamed down Williams's face as he bowed low. "Thank you. Thank you." That night, long after the guests had left and the mansion had grown quiet, Judith stood alone in her garden. The moonlight bathed her in silver as she gazed at the stars. She thought of all she had endured: betrayal, poison, near death, and gunfire. She thought of the men who had stood between her and death. George, her loving husband; Benjamin, her faithful friend. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to weep freely, not in fear, but in gratitude. "Lord," she whispered, lifting her face to the heavens, "thank you for giving me back my family. Thank you for showing me that love is worth every battle." The night air carried her words softly, as if the heavens themselves were listening. The healing season had begun. George and Benjamin would need months of therapy to regain their strength, but the worst was over. Life at the Anderson mansion slowly returned to normal. Judith managed her businesses with renewed determination, while also caring for the men she loved most. Juliana found herself smiling again, her laughter echoing through the halls as Benjamin teased her gently, even in his weakened state. Though scars remained both physical and emotional, there was hope. Hope that the shadows had finally lifted, hope that the future would bring peace. And as the year wore on, Judith realized something profound. Survival was not just about living through the storm, it was about learning to dance again when the storm had passed. For the first time in years, Judith Anderson believed she could dance. The Anderson mansion, once marked by the echoes of betrayal and pain, was now filled with laughter, warmth, and the steady rhythm of a family healing. Months had passed since the violent night, when bullets nearly claimed George and Benjamin. Though scars lingered, the two men grew stronger each day, surrounded by the love of their wives and the respect of a grateful household. But as Judith often reminded herself, life was not only about the past, it was also about the future. And in that mansion, the future had two names: Jonathan and Eliana. Jonathan, the son of Benjamin and Juliana, had inherited his father's sharp mind and his mother's quiet resilience. Eliana, the daughter of Judith and George, carried her mother's commanding grace and her father's warmth. The two had grown up almost like siblings, running through the mansion gardens, studying together under the watchful eyes of their parents. But as they matured, it became clear their bond was deeper than childhood friendship. Jonathan often lingered by Eliana's side, carrying her books, listening to her dreams of becoming an engineer. Eliana, in turn, admired his humility, his ability to laugh even when life felt heavy. Their parents noticed, but said nothing. When the time came for them to leave for university, Jonathan and Eliana both chose the same path: software engineering. Their acceptance letters arrived on the same day, and the mansion erupted with joy. At the University of Lagos, their bond only deepened. They were inseparable, studying together in the library, coding late into the night, walking hand in hand through the campus gardens. Eliana was brilliant, often leading group projects with natural authority. Jonathan, patient and innovative, complemented her perfectly. Professors often remarked, "Where you see one, the other is not far behind." Together, they became known as the Anderson duo, admired not just for their intelligence, but for the way they supported one another. But beyond academics, their friendship had quietly transformed into something neither of them could ignore. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the two sat on a bench overlooking the lagoon. The orange glow set on the water, and a soft breeze carried the scent of salt. Jonathan cleared his throat, his fingers fidgeting with the strap of his bag. "Eliana, have you ever wondered if maybe we're meant for more than just friendship?" Eliana turned to him, her heart racing. For years she had felt it, the way her pulse quickened when he smiled, the way she missed him when he was gone. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy but beautiful. Then Jonathan reached for her hand, his palm trembling. "I don't want to imagine a future without you." Eliana smiled through tears. "Then don't." Their fingers intertwined, sealing a quiet promise of love. The years passed quickly. Together, they excelled, graduating at the top of their class. On graduation day, their parents filled the auditorium, clapping with pride as their children walked the stage in flowing gowns. Judith's eyes glistened with tears as she leaned toward Benjamin. "Can you see? Our children are rewriting our story with hope." Benjamin nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "Yes, Judith, they are the future we never dreamed we could have." But with success came whispers. Some outsiders gossiped about their closeness. "Isn't it strange?" some muttered. The children of Judith and Benjamin becoming one. Others warned them that love could complicate their family ties. Jonathan and Eliana ignored the voices. They knew their love was pure, born not of scandal, but of years of shared trials and triumphs. It was a rainy evening in Lagos when Jonathan decided he could wait no longer. He invited Eliana to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. The rain had stopped, and the night glistened with reflections of neon lights. As soft music played, he led her to the edge of the terrace. Her eyes widened as she saw candles arranged in a circle, their flames flickering in the wind. "Jonathan," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. He dropped to one knee, his heart pounding. "Eliana Anderson, you are my best friend, my partner, my everything. We have walked together through laughter and tears, and I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Eliana's cheeks as she nodded, unable to find her voice. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, yes, I will." The restaurant erupted in cheers as Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger. The next morning, they gathered their courage and sat their parents down in the mansion's grand sitting room. Judith and George on one side, Benjamin and Juliana on the other. Jonathan held Eliana's hand tightly. "We have something to tell you," he began, his voice steady. "We are in love, and last night I asked her to marry me. She said yes." Silence filled the room. Judith and Benjamin exchanged glances. For years, they had silently wondered if this day might come. Judith's lips trembled as she spoke. "Jonathan, Eliana, your bond is special. It began in innocence and grew in love. Who are we to stand in its way?" Benjamin nodded, his eyes misty. "If our story could not be written together, then let it be written through you. You have our blessing." Juliana wept openly, clapping her hands in joy. George laughed warmly, rising to embrace them both. The decision was unanimous. Love would triumph once again. The months that followed were filled with excitement. Tailors stitched elaborate gowns, caterers planned feasts fit for royalty, and decorators transformed the grandest hotel in Lagos into a palace of light and flowers. The wedding was dubbed the Wedding of the Year, with dignitaries, celebrities, and business moguls in attendance. But for the family, it was more than a social event. It was a union of love and survival. On the morning of the wedding, Judith watched Eliana in her bridal gown, her heart full. "My daughter," she whispered, "you are proof that light always follows darkness. Shine today." Eliana embraced her mother, tears staining her veil. "I will, Mama. Because you taught me how." Benjamin adjusted Jonathan's tie, pride glowing in his eyes. "Son, you are the man I prayed you would become. Take care of her, as I once took care of Judith." Jonathan swallowed hard, nodding. "I will, Papa. Always." As Eliana walked down the aisle, escorted by George, her eyes met Jonathan's. He stood at the altar, his heart in his throat, watching the woman who had been his companion through every season of life. The ceremony was breathtaking vows, spoken through tears, rings exchanged with trembling hands, and a kiss that sealed not just their love, but the bond of two families forever entwined. Judith and Benjamin sat side by side, their eyes meeting across the aisle. No words were needed. Their children had accomplished what life had denied them, a union of hearts, built not on betrayal or regret, but on love. The celebration lasted late into the night, the ballroom alive with music and dancing. For Judith, George, Benjamin, and Juliana, it was more than a wedding. It was redemption. The seeds of tomorrow had bloomed into a future brighter than they ever imagined. The months following Jonathan and Eliana's wedding felt like a dream. The mansion that had once been haunted by betrayal and bloodshed was now filled with music, laughter, and the aroma of shared meals. Guests streamed in and out, relatives visited often, and neighbors marveled at how two families, once torn by tragedy, now lived as one. Benjamin often found himself sitting under the tall almond tree in the courtyard, watching Jonathan and Eliana return from work at Anderson Holdings. Their youthful energy reminded him of his own journey. The boy who once slept under a bridge, mocked and forgotten, now had a son thriving in love and success. Juliana would come out to join him, slipping her hand into his. "See, Benjamin," she would whisper, "our tears watered this garden. Now we are harvesting joy." Judith, too, lived with new light in her eyes. Years of pain had carved wisdom into her face, but now joy softened her features. George adored her deeply, and though their scars remained, they lived as if each day was a gift. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner in the mansion's grand dining hall, Eliana stood up, her hands trembling slightly. Jonathan rose beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. "Mama, Papa, Daddy, Mummy," she began, her voice shaky. "We have news." Juliana leaned forward. "What is it, my daughter?" Eliana's smile broke through her tears. "I am pregnant." "It's some." The room erupted in joy. Judith screamed with laughter, rushing forward to hug her daughter. George clasped Jonathan's shoulders, pride shining in his eyes. Benjamin and Juliana wept openly, holding each other as if the news had been for them too. The staff clapped, and songs of praise filled the hall. For Judith, it was more than the promise of grandchildren. It was proof that the family line, once threatened by betrayal, bullets, and bitterness, was not only surviving, but thriving. Eliana's pregnancy became the mansion's heartbeat. She was pampered endlessly. Judith insisted on supervising her diet. Juliana cooked her favorite soups, and Benjamin often sat by her side, sharing stories of resilience to keep her spirits high. At night, Jonathan would place his ear against her belly, grinning whenever he felt the slightest kick. "Our little one already wants to code," he joked. Eliana giggled, resting her hands on her stomach. "Or maybe she wants to argue like Grandma Judith." They didn't know yet that fate had a double gift in store. The labor came suddenly one humid August night. The mansion was thrown into frenzy. Cars rushed through Lagos traffic as Eliana was taken to the hospital. Judith and Juliana followed closely, praying aloud, their rosaries and Bibles clutched tightly. Hours later, the cry of a baby pierced the night air. And then, another. The doctor emerged, his face beaming. "Congratulations. Twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy. The mother is resting." Judith collapsed into George's arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. Juliana fell to her knees, thanking God. Benjamin hugged Jonathan so tightly the young man could barely breathe. When Eliana was wheeled out, exhausted but glowing, Judith kissed her forehead. "My daughter, you have doubled our joy." The babies were wrapped in soft blankets, the boy with tiny fists clenched, the girl with wide eyes already studying the world. They were named Jerry and Jessica, after loved ones gone but not forgotten. A month later, the Anderson Mansion's garden was transformed into a paradise of flowers and lights. Guests arrived in colorful Ankara, Gele, and Agbada, their laughter filling the air. Tables overflowed with jollof rice, grilled fish, plantains, and bottles of palm wine. A band played soft high-life music while children ran between the chairs, their laughter mingling with the adults. At the center, beneath a grand canopy, sat the proud parents with their twins cradled in white lace. Judith and George sat beside them, while Benjamin and Juliana occupied the other side, both couples glowing with joy. The ceremony was officiated by a pastor, his voice deep and commanding. He prayed over the children, blessing them with wisdom, strength, and favor. Traditional elders followed with chants, sprinkling symbolic water and cola nuts, declaring the twins as future bearers of legacy. When it was time for speeches, Judith rose slowly. A hush fell over the crowd. She stood with the microphone in hand, her elegant gown shimmering under the lights. Her voice trembled at first, but soon steadied, carrying across the garden like a song. "Many of you see joy tonight, the birth of twins, the laughter of family, the union of two houses. But I see more than joy. I see survival." The crowd listened intently. "There was a time when I was poisoned by those I trusted, when I lay in a coffin, about to be buried alive. And just when the earth was about to close over me, a man the world called a beggar shouted that I was not dead. That man was Benjamin." She turned, her eyes brimming with tears, and pointed to Benjamin, who lowered his head in humility. Years later, when evil returned to finish me, it was Benjamin again, and my husband George, who stood between me and death. They bled so I could breathe. They lay in their own blood, and yet they rose again. How can I not believe in miracles when I have seen them with my own eyes? Her voice broke, and Juliana reached up to dab her tears. "Today, I look at my daughter Eliana and Benjamin's son Jonathan, and I see that our bond was not meant for scandal, but for destiny. If George and I could not marry Benjamin and Juliana, our children have done it for us. And tonight, we are more than in-laws. We are one family." The crowd clapped, some wiping their eyes. Judith lifted little Jerry and Jessica, her voice rising. "These children are the proof that evil does not win, that kindness, courage, and second chances are stronger than betrayal and bullets. We are not just survivors. We are more than survivors. We are a family." The applause was thunderous. Music swelled, drums rolled, and guests erupted in song. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the mansion was quiet again, Judith sat alone in the garden with Benjamin. The stars glittered above them. "You know," Judith said softly, "there was a time I thought I would never forgive you for saving me." Benjamin chuckled weakly. "Forgive me? For stopping your burial?" "Yes," she smiled, "because in saving me, you tied our lives together forever. And sometimes that bond was too heavy. But now I see, it was God's plan." Benjamin looked at her with gentle eyes. "We walked through fire, Judith, and yet here we are, watching our children's children play under the same roof." Judith nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Yes, here we are." They sat in silence, the weight of years between them. Not heavy anymore, but golden, like memories polished by time. In the years that followed, Jerry and Jessica grew strong, loved by both households. Jonathan and Eliana balanced their roles as young parents and rising engineers at Anderson Holdings. Their love became an example to many that no matter the scars of the past, new stories could still be written. George and Judith devoted themselves to philanthropy, building schools and hospitals in memory of those lost. Benjamin and Juliana, too, started a foundation for the homeless, ensuring no one would endure the despair Benjamin once knew. Together, they built more than companies. They built legacies of kindness and resilience. 10 years later, the Anderson Mansion's garden once again hosted a gathering. But this time, it was not for tragedy, nor even a wedding. It was a reunion of generations. Jerry and Jessica, now lively children, played with their cousins under the watchful eyes of grandparents. Jonathan and Eliana stood side by side, their arms around each other, smiling at the future they had created. Judith, older now, her hair touched with silver, stood at the edge of the garden, watching with tears of joy. George came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "Look at them," he whispered. "This is what survival looks like." Judith nodded slowly, her heart full. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "This is what grace looks like." The garden echoed with laughter, the sound of children running, and the warmth of family bound by love and forgiveness. For Judith, for Benjamin, for George and Juliana, the journey had been long and painful. But standing there, surrounded by the legacy of their sacrifices, they knew the truth. They were more than survivors. They were a testimony. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. The living room of the Williams mansion looked like a royal hall. White roses stood in tall glass vases. In the center, a silver casket rested on a black catafalque. Inside it lay Amanda Williams, billionaire CEO, only child of Williams Emeka, dressed in a rich white lace with a matching head tie. Cotton wool sat in her nose and ears. Her face looked calm, like someone who had finally stopped fighting. Juliet and Olivia, her closest friends, stood by the casket in black dresses. Tears slipped down their cheeks. George, Jonathan's best friend, and a quiet pastor, stood a few steps away with red eyes. The house staff filled the back of the hall, heads bowed. The doors opened. Jonathan Uche walked in, wearing a black kaftan. His steps were slow. He held his chest with one hand and rubbed his eyes with the other. He looked at Amanda for a long time. He shook his head and started to cry. George moved forward and held him. "It's okay," George whispered. "God will comfort you." Jonathan nodded, swallowed hard, and lifted his phone. He turned his back a little, put the phone to his ear, and covered his mouth with his left hand. He spoke in a low voice, but the room was quiet. Everyone could hear. "Hello, my love," he said. "She's finally gone." The words fell like a heavy iron door. Juliet froze. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. George's eyebrows jumped. Even the housemaids stopped breathing. "You know what this means," Jonathan went on, still whispering. "By tomorrow, I make myself head of the company. We'll change the name. Then we fly to Maldives for our wedding. Congratulations to us." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. The silence broke. "Jonathan!" Olivia snapped, stepping forward. "How wicked can you be? Your wife's body is still here." George's voice was tight with pain. "If someone told me this, I would not believe it." "Jonathan, what happened to you?" Juliet wiped her tears and faced him. If your mission is to take her father's legacy, we will fight you with everything we have." Jonathan looked shocked for a moment, then his face hardened. He opened his mouth to speak, but let's go back to where the fire started. 10 years earlier, Jonathan and Amanda were the perfect picture. He was a smart bank manager. She was already a billionaire CEO at 25, the only child of William Zemeka. She had inherited her father's company and his calm strength. They married in a simple church in Ikoyi, with white flowers and bright music. People whispered, "What a blessed couple." Then came Nadia. Their baby girl laughed like bells and clapped for everything: the blender, the TV remote, even the dog. But life can be hard even for people with money. One evening, a fever rose fast. A hospital light blinked. Hands moved quickly. Prayers filled the air. And then, silence. Nadia was gone. The house turned heavy. Amanda worked more. Jonathan smiled less. They tried hospital after hospital, test after test. They waited for a new baby that never came. The years felt like a tight knot that hands could not untie. Amanda did not hold back her love. She gave Jonathan a special credit card with no limit. "Buy what you like," she said. "Travel where you want." She gave him 3 SUVs for a small convoy because he said it made him feel safe. She paid for their vacations every year. She trusted him the way a child trusts light. Jonathan said the bank was stressful. He resigned. Amanda made him account officer for Williams Group. It looked like a sweet gift, but it was a doorway. Now he saw the inflows. He studied the streams of money the way a fisherman studies a river. And something dark started in his heart. One night, he sat up in bed. "Amanda," he said, voice soft. "What is mine is yours. What is yours should be mine. Let's change the company's name to Williams and Jonathan Group. Let's add my name to the ownership." Amanda sat up too. She cleaned her face with her palm and stared at him. "Are you joking?" He smiled. "Maybe. I can't do that," she said, voice firm. "I love you, but I will not change my father's legacy. If all I have given you is not enough, we can end the marriage peacefully." He laughed then, lifting both hands. "Ah, I was just playing. See your face." He wasn't playing. Soon, Jonathan got a mistress, Sandra. He bought her a mansion on Banana Island, in her name. He said it was an investment. He started sleeping out. Sometimes he vanished for 2 days. He returned with small stories, traffic, meetings, sudden trips. Amanda's heart knew something was wrong. She hired a top private investigator. Quiet, careful, invisible. The man tracked bank trails and car trackers. He watched door cameras and followed signatures. He brought photographs and papers. He brought dates, times, and amounts. It was the investigator who first told Amanda about the Banana Island mansion in Sandra's name. He showed how $5 million disappeared from the company's foundation account. He showed record of cars sold off in secret. He showed patterns that looked like steps toward a throne. Betrayal is like cold water poured down the back. Amanda saved every file, every receipt, every chat. She said little, she watched, she prayed. And then, one ugly whisper reached her ears. Jonathan was planning to take her life after he contacted assassins. Jonathan had set a plan for the day. Her day. Amanda called Dr. Nelson, the family doctor. She trusted him. She gave him everything. The names, the dates, the fear. They formed a plan that sounded crazy but safe. On the morning the hit was meant to happen, Amanda would be declared dead. They would watch who clapped and who cried. They would see Jonathan's true face. On that morning, Amanda bathed and dressed like a queen. White lace, matching head tie, gold jewelry, perfume like soft rain. She lay on the big bed and called Nelson. He rushed in, checked her pulse, and shouted for the maid. "Cynthia, did Madam call you at night?" Cynthia shook her head, already crying. "No, doctor." Nelson bowed his head and sighed. "She's gone." The cry that rose from the staff shook the house. Cynthia rolled on the marble floor. The cook held the wall and sobbed. The gardener fell to his knees. Nelson made his calls. He called Jonathan too. "Sir," Nelson said, voice broken, "Amanda is gone. She called me early, but by the time I got here, on the other end of the city, in Sandra's bright kitchen, Jonathan made a loud wail. He ended the call, wiped his eyes, and told Sandra, "Let me first go and see. She may be doing this to get my attention." He returned to the mansion in the afternoon. By then, Amanda's body was in the silver casket, cotton wool in place, friends by her side. George had prayed for peace over her. The room was heavy with grief. And then came the call at the coffin. Back in the present, after Jonathan's whispered, "Congratulations to us," Olivia stepped in front of him. "You will not touch that company," she said, voice shaking. "Not after what you've done." George's jaw clenched. "Repent, Jonathan. This is a dark path." Jonathan's eyes flashed. "All of you should leave my house. From tomorrow." He stopped, frowning. Something had changed. Juliet's eyes were on the casket. Her face went pale. Olivia's finger trembled as she pointed. George took one slow step forward, lips parted. From inside the silver casket, beneath the soft light of the chandeliers, Amanda's fingers twitched. Then very gently her eyes opened. The room burst into screams. The housemaids scattered, chairs scraped. Someone shouted, "God!" George stumbled forward, hands raised. Jonathan staggered back, his spine pressing into the cold marble pillar, the phone slipping from his sweaty palm. Amanda's gaze locked on her husband, and the soft, careful calm on her face was gone. The scream that tore through the hall rattled the chandeliers. Amanda's eyes were wide open now, staring straight at Jonathan. Her chest rose and fell slowly. The cotton wool slid from her nostrils. She pushed herself up from the silver casket, her white lace gown catching the light like fire. Juliet stumbled backward and almost tripped over a chair. Olivia pressed her back against the marble wall, her hands shaking. George froze, his Bible clutched tightly in his hand. Jonathan's lips parted, but no sound came. His phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a sharp crack. He staggered back, one hand on the pillar, the other clutching at the air. "Impossible," he whispered. "No, this is impossible." Amanda swung her legs over the edge of the coffin and stood. Her heels tapped against the marble as she walked toward him. Her head held high. Her face was no longer soft. It was thunder. Jonathan's knees wobbled. He pointed at her with a trembling finger. You were dead." Nelson said, "You were gone." Dr. Nelson rose quietly from his chair at the corner of the room. His eyes glistened as he spoke. "Amanda was never dead. We only staged it. To see the truth." The staff gasped. Cynthia, the maid, dropped her scarf and covered her face with both hands. Juliet and Olivia looked from Amanda to Jonathan, their shock turning into rage. Amanda stopped in front of Jonathan. The space between them shrank to nothing, then smack. Her palm landed on his cheek with a sharp crack that echoed in the hall. The slap was hard. Jonathan stumbled sideways, gripping his face. "That," Amanda said through clenched teeth, "is for betraying me after everything I gave you." Her voice rose now, strong and sharp, cutting through the silence. "I gave you access to my life, my company, my wealth. I trusted you with my father's legacy. And what did you do? You hired assassins to end me. You wanted my name erased so you could crown yourself king." Jonathan's face twisted. He tried to speak, but Amanda lifted a hand to silence him. "No, Jonathan, don't speak. Everyone here has heard you already. Everyone here has seen your true heart. Even in front of my coffin, you called your mistress to celebrate. You thought my death was your doorway." Her eyes burned with tears, but her voice stayed firm. "You wanted to destroy me, but God has exposed you." Jonathan's mask cracked, his face darkened. You set me up," he hissed. "You tricked me, Amanda. But you can't win. You think this humiliation will stop me. You don't know me." George stepped forward, voice low but heavy. "Enough, Jonathan. You brought this on yourself." But Jonathan's anger only grew. He pointed a shaking finger at Amanda. "You may think you've won today, but mark my words, I will come back for you. This isn't over." The staff gasped again. Juliet raised her chin. "Do you hear yourself? You're threatening her in front of witnesses." Olivia crossed her arms. "Jonathan, you disgust me. We will not let you destroy Amanda's legacy." Amanda turned and raised her voice. "Cynthia, call the police." Cynthia didn't hesitate. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside the mansion. 2 black police vans pulled up, and armed officers stormed the house. The lead officer, Inspector Ade, stepped into the hall. "Mrs. Williams?" Amanda pointed at Jonathan. "That's the man. He planned my death. He stole from my company. He betrayed me and my father's name. Take him away." Jonathan laughed bitterly. You think the police scare me? I'll walk out of this tomorrow. I am Jonathan Uche. The officers didn't wait for him to finish. They grabbed his arms and pulled him toward the door. He struggled, shouting, Amanda, you will regret this. Sandra will stand by me. You can't take my life away. As the doors slammed shut behind them, the house grew quiet again. Amanda's shoulders sagged. She pressed her hand against her chest and breathed deeply. Juliet ran to her and hugged her tight. You are the strongest woman I know, she whispered. We thought we lost you. Olivia took Amanda's hand. Thank God you are alive. Jonathan showed his true self. George, his voice still thick with grief, shook his head. I cannot believe it. My friend, my brother, reduced to this level of greed. Amanda, I pray for your strength. This battle is not over yet. Amanda looked at all of them, her face a mixture of sadness and steel. It's not just about me anymore. This is about my father's legacy. Jonathan wanted to erase Williams's name from history. I will never let that happen. Dr. Nelson stepped closer. Amanda, you must prepare. He will fight. Men like him don't give up easily. Amanda nodded slowly. Then let him fight. I am ready. But this time, he won't be fighting me alone. He will be fighting the truth. Outside, the sound of the police van faded into the distance, but inside Amanda's chest, a storm still raged, because she knew one thing. Jonathan was dangerous, and even behind prison walls, his shadow could still reach her. She turned to George, Juliet, Olivia, and Nelson. This is only the beginning. Her words hung heavy in the air, and at that very moment, miles away, in the back of a speeding police van, Jonathan sat with his hands cuffed, his eyes burning like fire. He leaned forward and whispered, This is not the end. Amanda, you will see me again. The metal doors of the Ikoyi prison slammed shut behind Jonathan Uche with a thunder that seemed to echo deep inside his chest. His hands were cuffed, his face swollen from Amanda's slap, and his once carefully ironed kaftan now looked like a rag. The corridors smelled of sweat, rust, and damp concrete. 2 warders dragged him past rows of barred cells. Inside, hardened men leaned against iron railings, their eyes following him with a mix of curiosity and menace. Some hissed, others whistled mockingly. So this is the famous Jonathan Uche, one prisoner jeered. The banker who turned thief. Another laughed. See as he dayform billionaire for outside, now he go chop beans with us. Jonathan's lips tightened. Rage boiled inside him, but he kept silent. He told himself, this is temporary. Amanda thinks she has won. She doesn't know who I am. I will walk free, and when I do, I'll make her pay. The warders shoved him into a dimly lit cell with 6 other inmates. A thin mattress lay on the floor, stained and torn. Rats scurried in the corner. The stench was unbearable. The cell leader, a burly man with tribal marks, stood up and smirked. New fish, welcome. My name is Bullet. Here, nothing is free. If you want peace, you pay. If not, he cracked his knuckles. Jonathan straightened his back. Do you know who I am? Bullet laughed so hard the others joined in. Everybody here be somebody outside. In here, you are nothing. He pushed Jonathan onto the mattress. Respect yourself, banker. It stood not the tum. That night, Jonathan lay awake, his mind racing. He thought of Amanda's eyes, burning with fury as she exposed him. He thought of the police van, the handcuffs biting his wrists, and the jeers of the staff who once bowed before him. But above all, he thought of Sandra, his mistress, his secret partner in greed. She had promised to stand by him. She had whispered to him, Don't worry, Jonathan. If anything happens, I'll fight for you. A bitter smile spread across his face. Sandra will save me. Amanda doesn't know the war she started. Meanwhile, Amanda sat in her office at Williams Group headquarters, her father's portrait staring down at her from the wall. The events of the funeral replayed in her head like a storm. She still felt the tremor in her hands, the weight of betrayal cutting through her chest. Juliet entered quietly, carrying files. Madam, these are the financial reports from the past 3 years. We found dozens of unauthorized withdrawals. Jonathan moved billions into accounts linked to shell companies. Amanda closed her eyes briefly. How could I have been so blind? Olivia placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Don't blame yourself. Jonathan is a master of deception. He used love as a mask. Amanda opened one of the files and sighed. This will be a long fight. He may be in prison, but his fingerprints are everywhere. If we don't clean this mess, Williams' group will collapse. George walked in, his face lined with worry. Amanda, we need to talk about court. Jonathan's lawyer has already filed for bail. Amanda's eyes sharpened. Bail? After everything he did? George nodded. They argue there's no solid evidence tying him to attempted murder. They claim it was all misunderstanding. Amanda's heart pounded. She stood. No, I will not let him walk free. If it means standing in court myself, I'll do it. The truth must be heard. At that same moment, Sandra sat in her luxury apartment on Victoria Island. She was draped in silk, a glass of red wine in her hand, her phone pressed to her ear. Yes, barrister, she said coolly. Do everything possible to free Jonathan. Money is not the problem. He is the father of my unborn child. Her words were icy, deliberate. She had rehearsed them for weeks. In truth, she wasn't pregnant. She had only used that lie to tighten her grip on Jonathan's wealth. When the call ended, she leaned back and smirked. Jonathan, you fool. You thought you were using me. But soon I will control everything. Amanda is strong, but I am smarter. She took another sip of wine, her mind already weaving plots. If Jonathan rots in prison, I still win. If he comes out, I'll bend him to my will. Either way, Amanda loses. 2 weeks later, the Lagos High Court buzzed with journalists, lawyers, and curious citizens. The case of State versus Jonathan Uche had become the talk of the nation. Amanda arrived in a black Mercedes, flanked by security. She wore a navy blue gown, her hair tied neatly, her face calm but unreadable. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Williams, is it true your husband tried to kill you? Do you feel safe now that he's in custody? Amanda said nothing. She walked straight into the courtroom, head held high. Inside, Jonathan sat in the dock, dressed in prison uniform. He looked thinner, his moustache unkempt, but his eyes still carried fire. When Amanda entered, he smirked. You're glowing, Amanda, he sneered. Don't worry. This court is just a stage. I'll be free soon. And when I return, you'll beg for mercy. Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't reply. The judge, an elderly man with sharp eyes, banged his gavel. Order in court. Let us proceed. The prosecution laid out evidence. Bank records, eyewitness accounts, and recordings from Amanda's staged death. Dr. Nelson testified about Jonathan's threats. Cynthia described how Jonathan withdrew money secretly at midnight. But the defense struck back fiercely. Jonathan's lawyer painted Amanda as a manipulative wife, staging her own death to ruin her husband. He claimed the bank withdrawals were business investments, not theft. At one point, Jonathan himself took the stand. His voice dripped with false humility. I loved Amanda. I still love her. She is my wife. I never planned to harm her. This is all a misunderstanding fueled by jealousy and mistrust. Gasps filled the room. Amanda's fists clenched. She wanted to shout, but George placed a calming hand on her arm. Then, the judge turned to Amanda. Mrs. Williams, will you testify? The room went silent. Amanda rose and walked to the witness stand. She looked straight at Jonathan, her voice steady. You speak of love, Jonathan, she said. But true love does not hire assassins. True love does not empty bank accounts. True love does not call a mistress on the day of his wife's funeral to celebrate. You betrayed not only me, but every soul that trusted you. This is not love. This is greed. And greed has no place in my father's company. The courtroom erupted. Journalists scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. Jonathan's face turned crimson. He slammed his fist on the dock. Lies, all lies. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Amanda turned to the judge. My lord, I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for justice. Let the truth speak. As the day's hearing ended, the judge adjourned the case for final arguments. Amanda walked out into the flashing lights of the press. She answered only one question. What do you want from this trial, Mrs. Williams? Her answer was calm, simple, and powerful. Justice, nothing less. Meanwhile, inside the prison van, transporting him back, Jonathan leaned close to a fellow inmate and whispered, I need a phone. Money will flow if you help me. Amanda thinks this trial will end me, but I'll strike before the final judgment. The inmate grinned. For the right price, anything is possible. Far away, Sandra watched the news broadcast with a sly smile. She touched her flat stomach and whispered, "Both of them think they're smart, but the game is mine to win." Amanda didn't know it yet, but her greatest battle was only beginning. The morning sun cast a pale glow over Lagos High Court. Inside, tension hung thick in the air. The trial had reached its climax, and the whole city buzzed with anticipation. Vendors outside the courthouse sold newspapers with screaming headlines. Banker turned betrayer. Jonathan Uche faces justice. Amanda stood at the mirror in her chambers before the hearing began, adjusting the collar of her white blouse. Her reflection stared back at her calm, determined, unbroken. She whispered under her breath, "Father, give me strength. This is bigger than me now." Juliet entered, carrying a folder. "Madam, these are the new documents from our auditors. They confirm Jonathan laundered over 5 billion naira through shell companies." Amanda took the file and skimmed through. Her heart tightened, but her face remained firm. "This is the nail in his coffin." Olivia walked in, her voice low. "Be careful, Amanda. Jonathan is cornered, and desperate men are dangerous. I have a feeling he won't go down without trying something reckless." Amanda nodded. "Let him try. The truth is my shield." That same morning, Jonathan sat hunched in the damp cell, his eyes bloodshot. The night had been long, his mind restless with schemes. Bullet, the cell leader, approached him with a smirk. "You promised money, banker. Where is it?" Jonathan lifted his chin. "You'll get it, but I need a phone first. There are people I must contact before this trial ends." Bullet narrowed his eyes, then signaled another inmate. Minutes later, a battered old phone was slipped into Jonathan's hands. With trembling fingers, he dialed Sandra's number. She picked up almost instantly. "Jonathan," her voice purred. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd forgotten me." His voice was sharp. "Sandra, enough games. I need you to do something for me. Amanda must not win this case. I want her silenced before the verdict." Sandra's lips curved into a smile. She swirled her wineglass lazily. "Oh, Jonathan, you're still giving orders from prison. That's bold. But tell me, what do I get if I help you?" Jonathan clenched his jaw. "You'll get everything once I'm free. The company, the money, our future." Sandra leaned back on her sofa. "Our future? Or your future? Don't forget, Jonathan, I hold secrets that can bury you deeper than Amanda ever could." His breath caught. "Sandra, what are you saying?" She laughed softly. "I'm saying, maybe Amanda isn't my enemy. Maybe she's the one I should be talking to." Before Jonathan could respond, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, fury consuming him. "Sandra, you snake." By noon, the courtroom was packed. Lawyers shuffled papers, journalists whispered, and cameras clicked as the judge entered. Jonathan was led in by prison guards, his hands cuffed, but his expression carefully composed. Amanda sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by George, Juliet, and Olivia. She didn't look at Jonathan, though she could feel his gaze burning into her. The prosecution began. "My lord, today we present final arguments. The evidence is overwhelming. Financial theft, attempted murder, and betrayal of trust. The accused cannot escape justice. They displayed documents, played recorded calls, and even brought witnesses who testified about Jonathan's secret meetings with hired killers." When it was the defense's turn, Jonathan's lawyer stood, his tone dramatic. "My lord, this case is nothing but a family quarrel turned public spectacle. Mrs. Williams staged her death to humiliate her husband. There is no concrete proof that he plotted her murder. He is a man wrongly accused." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Amanda's fists tightened. Finally, the judge turned to Jonathan. "You may speak before we close." Jonathan rose slowly. He looked around, his voice smooth. "I admit mistakes. Yes, I mishandled funds. But to say I planned to kill Amanda? No, she was my wife. I loved her. This case is her revenge, nothing more." He turned his gaze on Amanda, eyes narrowing. "But let me warn you, Amanda. If you think this court will save you, you are mistaken. You cannot destroy me." Gasps filled the room. The judge slammed his gavel. "Silence. Mr. Uche, control yourself." Amanda finally rose, her voice calm but cutting. "Jonathan, love does not hire assassins. Love does not celebrate at the grave of its partner. You betrayed everything my family stood for, and today you will answer for it." Far from the courtroom, Sandra sat at a cafe, watching the trial live on television. The more she watched, the clearer her plan became. She pulled out her phone and dialed a new number. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Williams's office?" she asked sweetly. "I have information that can help your case, but I want something in return." Her eyes glittered. She was about to switch sides, but not for loyalty, only for survival. After hours of arguments, the judge leaned forward. His voice was grave. "This court has heard both sides. The evidence is heavy, the emotions deep, but justice must be fair. I will deliver my judgment in 7 days." The gavel struck. Court adjourned. Reporters surged forward. Guards rushed Jonathan out. Amanda remained seated for a moment, her breath steadying. 7 days. 7 days until everything was decided. But as she walked out, Olivia whispered, "Be careful, Amanda. 7 days is enough for Jonathan to try something dangerous." Amanda nodded, her eyes darkening. "Then we will be ready." That night, Sandra arrived unannounced at Amanda's mansion. She wore a black gown, her face covered with a scarf. The guards hesitated, but Amanda ordered them to let her in. When they were alone, Sandra pulled off her scarf and smiled faintly. "Amanda, we need to talk." Amanda's eyes hardened. "You dare come here?" After standing beside Jonathan in betrayal, Sandra raised her hands. "I am not here as your enemy. Jonathan is planning something from prison. He wants you dead before the verdict. He called me himself." I refused. Amanda studied her closely. "Why are you telling me this? What do you gain?" Sandra's smile was thin. "Survival. Jonathan is finished. Aligning with him means sinking with him. But you, Amanda, you are the future. I want to be on the winning side." Amanda shook her head in disbelief. "You betrayed me once. Why should I trust you now?" Sandra leaned forward. "Because I know his next move. He bribed prison guards. Someone will come for you within the week. If you don't believe me, wait and see." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Amanda said, "If this is true, Sandra, then you've signed your own confession. But remember, if you're lying, I will expose you myself." Sandra's smile didn't falter. "Then let us see who survives these 7 days." Back in his cell, Jonathan stared at the ceiling, rage burning in his veins. Bullet approached, whispering, "Everything is ready. The message has been sent. She won't live to hear the verdict." Jonathan closed his eyes, a cold smile curling his lips. "Good. Amanda thought she buried me. Now it's time to bury her for real." But across Lagos, Amanda sat at her desk, replaying Sandra's warning in her mind. She lifted her phone and called Inspector Ad. "Inspector," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "Double my security. The war isn't over yet." The city outside buzzed with life, unaware of the storm brewing in its heart. 7 days. Only 7 days until truth or death would decide the final chapter. The gavel came down like thunder. "Jonathan Uche, this court finds you guilty of financial fraud, attempted murder, and criminal conspiracy. You are hereby sentenced to 7 years imprisonment with hard labor." Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Amanda exhaled, a shiver running through her body. She didn't cheer, didn't smile, only closed her eyes and whispered, "Justice is done." Jonathan stood motionless in the dock, his face pale. For the first time, the mask of arrogance cracked. The reality of years behind bars settled on him like chains too heavy to carry. As the warders dragged him away, he turned back one last time. His eyes locked on Amanda's. "I'll write to you," he whispered. Amanda didn't reply. She turned her back. Months later, the news broke across Lagos. Sandra Uche wins mansion case, judge rules in her favor. Sandra had stunned everyone by dragging Williams Group and Amanda into court, claiming that Jonathan had promised her the Banana Island mansion as a gift before his arrest. With cunning lawyers and forged documents, she fought bitterly. On the day of judgment, the judge declared, "Though the accused, Mr. Jonathan, is in prison, evidence suggests that the property transfer was legally executed. The court hereby rules that Miss Sandra retains ownership of the Banana Island mansion." Sandra stepped out of court with a triumphant smile, reporters flashing cameras. She spoke into microphones. "This is justice. People thought I would fall. But I stand. This mansion is mine by right." Amanda watched the broadcast in her office, fury surging through her veins. George slammed his fist on the desk. That snake has the mansion now. What next? Amanda sighed deeply. Let her keep it. A house cannot define me. I have bigger battles and bigger dreams. And so, she let it go. Sandra lived in the mansion, flaunting her victory, but little did she know that her story was heading for a fall of its own. 2 years after Jonathan's imprisonment, Amanda's life took a surprising turn. She had focused on rebuilding Williams Group, restoring its image, and regaining the trust of shareholders. The company flourished again under her leadership. One evening, at a business conference in Abuja, she met Sam Okoro, a humble but brilliant architect, contracted to design a new Williams Group headquarters. Sam was nothing like Jonathan. He was gentle, respectful, and deeply spiritual. Their friendship blossomed over shared late-night project discussions, laughter over coffee, and long drives where they spoke about life beyond business. Soon, friendship turned into love. One Sunday morning, Sam knelt before Amanda in her garden, holding a small velvet box. "Amanda," he said, his eyes glistening, "I know your heart has been through storms. But will you let me be the calm after the storm? Will you marry me?" Amanda's eyes brimmed with tears. She saw not greed, not manipulation, but genuine love in his eyes. She whispered, "Yes, Sam, 1,000 times, yes." Their wedding was held in a grand hall in Lagos, decorated with white roses and gold drapes. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a celebration of survival, healing, and hope. Months later, Amanda gave birth to twin boys. The cries of her children filled her home with a joy she had never known before. She named them David and Daniel, symbols of strength and God's justice. For the first time in years, Amanda felt free. While Amanda built a new life, Jonathan's days in prison were long, harsh, and humbling. The arrogant banker became a broken man. Bullet, the cell leader, no longer respected him. Guards mocked him. Fellow inmates reminded him daily of the wealth he once flaunted. In the darkness of those nights, Jonathan began to write. At first, the letters were filled with anger and blame. "Amanda, you ruined me. You turned the world against me. One day, you will regret this." But as months passed, bitterness melted into regret. He wrote again, "Amanda, I think of you every day. The company, the house, the life we had, I lost everything. But the greatest loss was you. I see it now. My greed blinded me. I am sorry." Years passed, and the letters grew softer, more desperate. "Amanda, I pray you are happy. I pray your life is full, even without me. I was a fool. Forgive me." At first, Amanda ignored them. She tore some apart, threw others into the fire. But as the years went by, curiosity made her read them. And slowly, she began to see the change in his words, from arrogance to humility, from denial to acceptance. 7 years later, Amanda stood at the gates of Ikoyi prison. Her twins were now 6 years old, and Sam stood beside her, supportive. "Are you sure about this?" Sam asked gently. Amanda nodded. "Yes, I need closure. For me, for the boys, for the past." Inside the visiting room, Jonathan sat across the table, older, thinner, his moustache grey, his eyes sunken. The moment he saw her, tears welled up. "Amanda," his voice cracked. "You came." Amanda studied him quietly. Gone was the proud banker, the schemer. In his place sat a broken man. "I read your letters," she said softly. He lowered his head. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to say it anyway. I am sorry. For everything. For Sandra. For the money. For the lies. I destroyed us." Amanda's throat tightened. For years she had carried anger like a wound. But looking at him now, she felt something unexpected pity. "I forgive you, Jonathan," she whispered. "Not for you, but for me. I refuse to carry your sins any longer." Jonathan broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Months later, Jonathan was eventually freed and walked out of prison a free man. No mansion, no billions, no power, only the clothes on his back and a folder of old letters. He expected to walk into nothingness. But outside the prison gates, Amanda stood waiting with Sam and the twins. "Where will you go?" Amanda asked. Jonathan shook his head. "I don't know. I have nothing." Amanda looked at him steadily. "You still have a chance. If you are willing to start small, Williams Group will give you a place, not in the boardroom, but in one of our branches. Prove you can rebuild." Jonathan's lips trembled. You would do that? After everything?" Amanda nodded. because forgiveness without opportunity is incomplete. Take it, Jonathan. Start again. Tears rolled down his cheeks. For the first time, he bowed his head, not in shame, but in gratitude. While Jonathan found a path to redemption, Sandra's life unraveled. Her victory with the mansion was short-lived. Her lavish lifestyle, endless parties, and reckless spending drained her accounts. She tried to gamble into wealth, but debts mounted. Enemies she had stepped on began circling like vultures. Within years, she lost everything: the cars, the jewelry, even the Banana Island mansion seized by creditors. One rainy evening, Amanda received news that Sandra had been spotted wandering barefoot in Balogun Market, begging for food. Amanda shook her head sadly. Greed always devours its own. Years later, Jonathan sat at a desk in a modest Williams Group branch office in Surulere. He wore a simple shirt and tie, carefully checking loan applications. He wasn't a boss anymore, just a staff member learning humility, rebuilding brick by brick. In his drawer lay Amanda's last letter to him. Jonathan, true wealth is not money or power. It is peace, forgiveness, and love. Guard these, and you will never be poor again. He often read it when the weight of regret threatened to drown him. Meanwhile, Amanda thrived. With Sam by her side and her twins growing strong, she led Williams Group into a new golden age. Her story became an inspiration, proof that betrayal could break you but not destroy you, that forgiveness could heal even the deepest wounds. On Sundays, when she and Sam attended prayer service with their children, Amanda often caught sight of Jonathan at the back, sitting quietly, his prayer book open, his head bowed, and in those moments she knew the circle was complete. The woman who had been betrayed found love, the man who had fallen found redemption, and the story of greed, betrayal, and justice ended not in bitterness, but in forgiveness and second chances. What is your view about this story? If you were in Amanda's shoes, would you have forgiven Jonathan despite what he did? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.